Hello, friends, and welcome to Which Isle, where we talk about spirituality and mental health and how they work together. We are your hosts. I am Charmaine,
And I am Krystle.
and today we are going to have a conversation about relationships. And now let me make my own self disclaimer right here that I'm not a relationship expert. And I'm just pulling from the 46 years of experience that I have on the earth with relationships and the various types that I have experienced and how I handled them at my most toxic and how I handle them now as I'm healing through my traumas. So I am not an expert at all, and I don't claim to be. That's my disclaimer. How about you, Krystle?
Well, I am definitely not a relationship expert, but I definitely wish to have the most beneficial relationship with each individual person in my life as possible, in the highest good and the highest light.
Awesome. All right. So the definition is it's the way in which two or more concepts, objects, or people are connected, or the state of being connected. That is what a relationship means. And I want to add here that probably the most important relationship that we need to have is the relationship that we have with ourselves. Because if our relationship with ourselves is sordid or traumatic, or there's stuff that you're avoiding about yourself, you aren't going to be able to be present to have a relationship with others that is healthy, because you will always be carrying around stuff with you that may not necessarily be true, because our perceptions can be tricky to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote down a few different relationships. We have relationship with self, your
Mhm.
relationship with source, the universe, God, however you like to, produce your faith.
Mhm.
Um, your relationship with your family, with your children, with your spouse, your relationship with your friends, your relationship with coworkers, acquaintances, you name it. Every person that you meet, you have some sort of a relationship with.
Yep, and actually, I had that written down too. There were four types of relationships, but we kind of added two to that, which were source and self, because you do need those two. That spirituality is and mental health is taking care of your emotional self, and that is a very important relationship. So that's actually six types of relationships, but family relationships, friendships, acquaintanceships, and romantic relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that's the whole thing is like there's so many. And then there's, you also have to take into consideration another thing that most people don't realize or think about is that once you're in relationship with someone, you are always in relationship with someone. It's not a breakup, it is a changing of the relationship. It is
Mhm.
not. So if you are married and you go through a divorce, you have not transitioned out of relationship. Your relationship is now divorced.
Right, right. That it doesn't. It's like you don't get divorced and then that relationship never existed. It's still there as an experience in your memory banks. We don't get to just erase stuff. So yeah, it counts.
And the relationship with the person that you are divorcing in this aspect, we'll just use that, is your relationship is still a relationship. It has just changed in its nature. Maybe now you're adversaries.
Hmm.
Maybe now you are co-parents.
Right.
Maybe now you have a better relationship as friends than you ever did as a couple. It's just how the nature of it just changes. And then we have
Right.
it goes with that ebb and flow. Not all things are things. And I also believe that we grow into relationships and grow out of relationships as well. And then that, so like it doesn't, like the whole, oh, you get married at 18 years old and you're married for 60 years. Well, that doesn't work for everybody,
Right.
because both people in that relationship have to be growing at about the same rate to be able, because if one grows far more than the other, then you have no commonalities anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep, that
relationship
it
nature
does.
just changes.
Right. And then we also have to take into consideration that our relationship, the way we learn about relationships, comes from what our parents teach us. Now, we don't realize that we're being taught this as, excuse me, as children, because as we are children, we just see our mom and dad. Now, how they behave as we are growing up together teaches us what relationships look like. Now, if that's the only relationship that we see, that's what we're going to believe a relationship is like. And we're going to mirror that in our own lives, unless we realize that's a toxic cycle and we break it. And so we have to remember that it's that relationship that we see that ends up being very similar to maybe some of the first relationships. Like I said, I've had a lot of relationships. So I will say that my marriage ended up being a lot like my parents' marriage. Like when I look back and I see the two next to each other, because I haven't been married for 12 years now. So when I look back at that, I can see where my parents' marriage and my marriage were very, very similar. And I just emulated what I saw, but I also didn't feel good in it. And I realized early that I didn't want my children falling into the same trap by finding a partner that mirrors what doesn't work, or doesn't look like it works. So, or know that it wasn't going to work for me. I know that's not the relationship I want. And it's not the relationship I wanted as a kid. It's just the only relationship type I'd ever really seen. And I'd seen a few different marriage styles, but I'd never seen anything that actually works where it was happy. Like that's very few and far between.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we mimic as children what we know or what we are shown, because what our perception and our ego starts being developed from our caretakers, our caregivers, our parents, our grandparents, the adults that are in our lives. This goes all the way back around to like our first, recordings, but
Mhm.
everything that we base on, how we maneuver through life is based on how we saw the adults in our lives behave. And so
Exactly.
that translates to relationships for sure.
So think about this. How do you treat your children? Then think back to how you were treated as a child. Now, if you have difficulty with your children, with communication, with, if your children are just difficult, some children are just difficult. What are they mirroring though? Are they have to be, it's coming from somewhere. So are they mirroring something that they're seeing within the relationship between you and your spouse? Or if you're already divorced or separated, how are they mirroring you? Or if they're spending more time with your spouse, how are they mirroring their spouse, your spouse, your ex-spouse at that point? Like I can tell you that my kids lived with my ex, and I can see where they have mirrored his behavior after the divorce because they didn't spend as much time with me. Now that just meant I had to compensate somewhere else. I had to make sure that I had a relationship that was open to communication between the children, because now that the divorce happened, we could never be really good friends after the divorce. I wanted to still remain friends and be able to talk. I just don't think it is possible. I still think he's very hurt. So we've never been able to communicate after the divorce. It's always been through the children. So it was learning to communicate through the children in a way that would not trigger the other spouse into being nasty to the children. I had to remember that I couldn't be talking bad about him around the children or within, like, the kids were in my house. I could not talk about my ex-husband because walls are thin. Kids here, they pick up on things. And I just did not want them to pick up on that kind of negativity. Now, of course, they picked up on some because I'm not perfect. But I do know that right now, my children and I have a great relationship. They call me when they need me. And sometimes they need me for 3.5 hours on the phone to fill out a college application for Sally Mae to make sure that they can get into college. And, if I have to spend 3.5 hours on the phone, that's a small thing, but I know my children will talk to me. And it was all key to me realizing that I needed to build that bond with my children because it couldn't be involved with him. He couldn't be the middleman in that because it had to come from me. Otherwise, they didn't know where it was coming from.
Right, absolutely. Like that's me. Like right now, I'm trying to discover how to have an open communication line with my children, fostering those relationships with them, because I do recognize, I'll give an example here in a second. I do recognize where how I was parented sometimes comes out when I'm frustrated or whatever. Like, I have a really hard time getting my kids out of bed. I don't know why. I mean, I try to make them go to bed at a certain time. I try to make them get up at a certain time. I mean, here it is. We're summer, and I have a rule that there is no sleeping past noon.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like this rule. And so, what I'm trying, I see like my dad come out a little bit whenever, I try to wake up Kenley, and she is just and swatting at me and everything else. And then I finally get her up, and then she's grumpy and like has her hair hanging in her face and she's sniffling. And I'm like, why are you doing this? I'm having to really take a look and see how to twist what I'm doing in a way that makes me still feel okay and doesn't make her feel bad.
Right.
But still gets the accomplished result of being out of bed before noon because we're not going to stay up all night. I don't care if it is summer.
Well, maybe that's what you need here in this situation is a negotiation. And instead of look, you're not sleeping past noon, period. Maybe it is, you know what? On the weekends, you get leeway. On the weekends, you can sleep past noon, but only on the weekends. During the weekday or the weekdays, the days that you would normally go to school or the days you would normally be working a job, you have to be up at X hour because, whether it's 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, you have to be up by this time. When I looked at scheduling, when it came to my middle child that is now entering university, he called me concerned about, I'm not sure I can do work study because work study is going to require hours and I'm taking 16 credit hours and I'm afraid that I'm not going to have enough time. And so I had to sit and explain and help him see that, look, here's what the week looks like. And if you are up at 7 o'clock every morning, actually, I think the schedule starts at 8 o'clock a.m. for them at breakfast. Breakfast, they get an hour at 8 a.m. and then an hour at lunch and an hour at dinner, and then fills in the classes and all the blocks for a week schedule. He should have 35 hours of free time still. Well, not 35 hours. I think 35 hours is what is scheduled. There's still free time in the week for other things to happen. And I think that was with a work study calculated in. So, I made sure that he was understanding that there's going to be time in the day. You're going to have time to get things done. You just have to remember that you have to be aware of what you have coming up so that you make sure that you're prepared for what is coming up. That way, every time you're in the situation where you need to be present, you can be present because you're not dragging along the bad stuff that happened in the past and then overcompensating about worrying way too much in the future. You can go present to present if you're being very aware of what needs to happen and the whole overall picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
What about familial relationships? That toxic adage of, well, you have to forgive them. That's your family.
Forgiveness. The very big thing about forgiveness is that the forgiveness is always for yourself. It should never be for another person. You should never forgive somebody because you feel like you have to forgive them because of a blood relation or whatever it is. Forgiveness is for yourself, for you to move on. And I learned very much the hard way because I looked for forgiveness everywhere. And I didn't realize that what I needed to forgive was myself. I need for thinking even that any of the traumatic things that happened to me were my fault. That's where my forgiveness needed to be because I was carrying along this guilt that everything that happened to me was my own fault. And carrying that non-truth as a truth for so long eventually breaks you down to feeling like garbage. And feeling like garbage doesn't feel good at all. It makes you hurt even worse. And at some point, the hurt gets so bad that you just want the hurt to stop. That's not, well, no, it's a suicidal thought, but it's not suicidal in as I want to kill myself. You're not thinking that. You're just thinking you want the hurt to stop. And that's where that thought becomes a rational thought. And that's how you got to prevent those things from getting that far, is that knowing that, your relationship with yourself has to be healed. You can't feel like you're all broken up inside and expect that next relationship that you get into is going to be the one that's going to heal you and make you whole again, because that's not how it works. You have to make yourself healed and whole yourself to bring about that relationship that is going to be healthy for you. Otherwise, you're going to keep jumping into unhealthy relationships again and again.
Yeah, the more I heal and the more I practice mindfulness and awareness and consciousness, the more I see in my family the toxicity.
Yep.
I very much avoid going to family gatherings
Yep.
because it's inevitable. I'm going to get, you know, I'm going to get upset because I can't just be loved as an individual for who I am. I'm not, I refuse to fit into the box that they have molded. And this is what you must fit into. If you don't fit into any of this stuff, then shame on you, or you're not welcome, or, you're just odd, or you just don't fit in. Well, I mean, I think that's kind of the point, is to be a unique individual.
Right.
To
Some
think for
families,
ourselves.
I think some families carry that collective trauma that your families have to run the same way. Like the family dynamic where we go camping every year and we do this every year. And, our holidays are spent like this with this family at this house, at this, and there's all that scheduled stuff. And then, we're built in to believe that that's the way the family must work. So when it doesn't work in that paradigm for whatever the reason, it's suddenly not the same and it's foreign, and then you're suddenly the black sheep for whatever reason. I had a discussion with my brother about, families and family dynamics and how we kind of got cheated on our family dynamic. And, the both of us, we kind of ran away. And like, I never returned to anywhere near home. My brother did return to back of that home. So I have always been on the outskirts somewhere else, far, far away, where I was kind of out of reach. But that split in the family made the family dynamic different. That doesn't mean we meet for holidays not the family doesn't get together for holidays at somebody's house. So we don't do Christmas together. We don't, that changed the way the family worked. And we haven't found any balance yet in that, but that's because we've both been healing. He didn't know he had a healing journey until 2020.
A lot of people.
not a real healing journey until 2020. And then I have been on a healing journey for a very, very, very long time. So I'm at a different place in that healing journey, but so I can see where he is and I understand where he's struggling, because there are all places that I struggled too. And all I can really do is let him know that, he's not alone. And that if he ever needs to reach out to talk to me, but all those places I recognize very deeply. I feel them very deeply because I've been there in the circumstance where I was fighting to make it work, trying to figure out what was going to work, how I was going to build a relationship with the children during a divorce. He's going through that now. That was a huge concern of mine. And I think my children seeing me work so hard to heal and actively be doing things, telling them, not letting them be in the dark about what I'm doing, going, okay, you know what, right now I'm practicing this mindfulness thing. So, I'm doing this, I'm letting you know I'm doing this. So that's why I need it quiet or whatever. I need 10 minutes to meditate. I'm meditating. Do you understand me? I need you to be quiet, or at least attempt to be quiet while I meditate. I don't need you to stop breathing. I just need you to quiet down. And then also realizing that I don't have control over every environment. So meditating isn't always going to be easy. There's always going to be background noise of some form, whether it's pleasant or irritating. And it's my job to not let that make me react while I'm in meditation. And I think right there, that has helped me develop my relationships pretty far, because I'm a lot better at not reacting initially to something that would have normally, back in the day, would have triggered me into a serious reaction where I either withdrew into myself or felt the need to have to stand up for myself and be on the attack. Being able to slow myself. And that's something you have to practice. If you don't make the attempts to practice, you can never just call on it when you're in the heat of the moment and need to not react to something.
Right. Absolutely. So, I'll go double back a little bit where, the family, holidays or whatever. It's just a story that I have that kind of just reiterates what you said. So I did not go, I had a falling out with my dad's family in the summer of 2019 and have not gone to Christmas, at grandma's since. And I spoke to my grandma a few weeks ago, and of course it wasn't the most pleasant experience again. But one of the things that she brought up was Christmas. And, we're talking in the middle of summer. We're talking about Christmas already, of course.
Right.
But she was complaining about how, nobody ever comes and just stays for the day anymore. Everybody's showing up at odd times. They're married, and so they've got other places they have to go. And it's just, and she was just beside herself because We were not, we as a family are no longer conforming to what her ideal of what Christmas morning is supposed to be like. Her ideal morning is we get up, we come to her house, we have breakfast, we open some presents, we have lunch, we open the Santa stocking stuff, and and then we just sit around all day, just in the living room, just, at her pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
But she was complaining because this cousin is married or getting married, and now he has to go to his fiance's families for Christmas at some point in the day, and and then I don't ever show up anymore, and it's just like, well, that's kind of what happens whenever your children grow up and get married and have families of their
Oh,
own.
right. Don't you, it's like you want to ask, but don't you want them to have their Christmas traditions and family gatherings now that they're heads of their family? Like, do you realize that eventually the parental units have to let go of the children, and then they're going to develop a life. And then it's like, we're not part of that life anymore on the regular. It's like, so that holiday time should be enjoyed for what it is, no matter what it is, because eventually it is going to change. Nothing stays the same. Oh, that's probably now one of our catchphrases, huh? We were talking about that.
Nothing is meant to stay the same, though.
Nothing
I
is meant to
mean,
say that. We are all meant to change and grow. That is what life is a growth process. We grow as children, we grow as teenagers, we grow as young adults, and then we grow old, and eventually we die. Growing is a part of all of those segments, and there's a whole life inside of those segments.
I mean, like, what, like, really, really, like, step back and think about it. All of the fighting in government, all of the fighting, from country to country. How much of all of that is someone's refusal to accept change? I mean, seriously, how much of all of it is just someone else's refusal to accept change? Well, this is the way it's always been, so this is the way it always must be.
Right, right. If you're saying this is the way it's always been, right there, you probably should check yourself. But just because it's always been a certain way, it doesn't mean there isn't a better way out there now or eventually that you will find.
Mhm.
And that's what we should all be looking for, is to continually upgrade ourselves so that we aren't staying the same all the time. Because if we're staying the same and we're comfortable, we're probably uncomfortable in our comfort because it's uncomfortable, but it's an uncomfortable we know, and less scary than change. It's always hard to change because sometimes change comes with a giant leap of faith that you have to take. Um, for me, ending my marriage was a huge leap of faith for me to take, because I was told all my life I needed life to be this way for it to work for me, because I couldn't be like that always ever. So when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? When are you going to, you think of all those questions that come across you in your life. When are you going to do this next? Oh, you're together now. When are you going to buy a house? We always get asked about these questions, implying that there's some sort of timeline we're supposed to be following. But that's not necessarily the case. Things happen when they're meant to happen. And we have to be open to the fact that maybe what is meant to happen is that we get into this relationship that's going to teach us something very profound. And then it's going to end, and it's going to teach us how to come back from an ending and the resilience it takes to begin again, because we're not meant to drown in our sorrows or to make ourselves drown in our sorrows. And a lot of times that happens to us when we find out that something didn't happen the way it was supposed to happen. Like, I really thought I would be married forever when I got married. And the fact that I got divorced was a huge letdown, and I had to forgive myself, not him. I had to forgive myself for wanting my relationship to be a way, and it wasn't that way, and I didn't handle it well, and I reacted. And my reaction eventually split apart our marriage, and it didn't work. I'm not sure that it ever was meant to work out, though. I believe that that was a learning experience that I needed to get me out of that spiral of the same relationship that was coming around and around and around. And I still believe I'm still learning about relationships that way, but I think in a different place when it comes to relationships. There was a time when I said, oh, fuck it, that's it. I'm never getting a relationship again. This is stupid. I'm not putting myself through that rigmarole. I'm not doing it to myself. But now I realize that it isn't so much of that. It's that I have been wanting a certain type of relationship and not getting it because I don't have that relationship with myself. It all comes back to me. And until I can cultivate that relationship within myself, it is never going to come into my circle. I'm going to keep getting the same crap over and over again. So it's really about upgrading oneself in the relationship before you can expect something that is actually going to be meaningful and healthy.
Okay, because so you bring me into that. That brings me into like, the soul relationships.
Oh,
Makes me think
good.
of that.
I was hoping that was going to bring you there.
Okay. So when you go through spiritual growth, and I mean, and you kind of have to know that you're on a spiritual path to be able to be open to this kind of relationship and knowing. So you lose everything. You lose it, or you seem like you lose everything. It seems like you lose everyone. Because as you grow your soul, as you grow your own self-love, and you cultivate that unconditional love within your own being, you start to drop away all things, people, relationships. They start to fall away to where you are left, where you feel alone and like there's just nobody out there for you. That's whenever you really have to start cultivating that self-love and that self-healing. But as you do that, as you bring in the love within yourself, because everything in the world is your mirror, right? Everything mirrors back to you how you feel on the inside. So every relationship that you have right now is a direct reflection of how you feel about yourself. So if you're in a troubled relationship and all this person does all of these things, well, guess what? You actually do all of those things yourself as well. So whenever you get into that self-love and treating yourself the right way, you start bringing in soul relationships, your soul family. And there are on the soul level, there are multiple types of relationships, and I'll just touch on them briefly. We have your karmic relationships, which are your relationships that are there to teach you a lesson. You will continually be bringing in the same person in a different meat suit until you learn the karmic lesson. Until you see and heal within yourself what it is that is bringing in that karmic soul tie, that karmic lesson. Until you can figure out what it is within you that attracts that, you're going to continue to attract that. Next, I have soul family, or these are like your, you incarnate with these souls all of the time. Charmaigne is my soul family. I know this,
Yeah.
but they're going to be souls that have the same core vibration. You come together based off of the core of your soul. And then there's like soul mates. This is like your perfect counterpart. This is a really, really easy, loving relationship. It doesn't, it's very, it's very easygoing, just very, not a whole lot of turmoil. This is, like there's a lot of soulmate bonds like that, and they're going to be from your soul family. You could be in a soulmate relationship, like, for example, Charmaine, you and I could have been, one of us could have been a male in another life, and we could have been married at one point.
Right.
You're those kinds of relationships in that soul bond family, they can be best friends, they can be lovers. It just kind of changes throughout lifetimes. And then there's the next one is, and it's not by far the first or the last, and not everyone has one, is twin flames.
Mm-hmm.
And a twin flame can go two different ways. A twin flame, if you meet your twin flame and you are not in a place of healing, it's a burnout relationship. You trigger each other into healing. But more than likely, if you are not on the healing path, it will burn out. You will separate. But if you are, this is my own understanding, everybody disagrees. I don't think anybody's wrong. I think it's all correct. But if you believe, if the twin flame, if you are in a healing place, if you are conscious and aware of what the relationship is and what that relationship is there to do, it's there to trigger you. It's there to be, that is your literal other half of your soul. So they are your mirror. So they are going to mirror back to you things that you need to heal. They're going to mirror back to you your most toxic traits. And if you can recognize those things and you can come into union, it is a divine counterpart union. It is a divine feminine and a divine masculine coming together to create a perfect union. And it takes work. So most of the time it fails because most people can't come out of the ego enough to recognize that you're each other's mirror, essentially. Like that's what you're here for. But twin flames are also meant to come together into union to raise the vibration of the planet as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like that's about as basic as I can get on them.
Right. No, but it makes sense that you want the raise in vibration. That's what makes that relationship feel good.
Yes.
I just want to bring up the 5 essentials for a healthy relationship, for any healthy relationship. And that is open communication, listening and feeling heard, working through disagreements, mutual intimacy, and trust. If any one of those things are broken in a relationship, the relationship can quickly turn toxic.
I wrote down, I had some things, I was just, the compatibility of a relationship to me is communication.
Oh, yes.
Trust, what you said. And with trust breeds safety.
Mm-hmm.
And with trust and safety breeds intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And intimacy is not sexual.
Right.
Intimacy is having a deep conversation about what honestly makes you tick. This is not a conversation with your spouse where you say something and you go, hey, what are your thoughts on that? And they just like, I don't know. I was thinking about, I can't answer that. I don't like anytime you have a relationship and you're trying to have open communication and that just, and that open communication, it has to go both ways. And, trust is, to me, trust is, you say you're going to do something and you follow through with it.
Right.
You breed trust by action by proving it. Like actions speak louder than words. They do. They do. I mean, words are nice, but you still need the action as well. And it takes finding that trust with someone for you to finally feel that safety. And then that's within that safety comes the intimacy of communication. It's all very much, like be what you say you are.
Right. Being able to trust in the relationship. Trust is one of those things that can be broken so easily and not so easily fixed. So, I know that once the trust was broken in my marriage, it was something that was just, there was no getting it back because I felt so hurt and violated. I finally allow myself to be vulnerable and I get hurt. But that is also part of, like, they're working through disagreements. That's finding out that maybe you weren't as compatible as you thought and being willing to work through those disagreements. But if the trust was already broken, I'm not going to be able to work through those disagreements because now I don't believe anything you say and your actions don't speak like you want to fix anything. So I can't. It's like, when do you stop trying and when do you finally say, I have to walk away because this isn't healthy anymore? And it's a very personal place to be. For me, it was literally like I found myself dreaming more and more about death, not as I want to commit suicide. It was, I am so tired. I am so tired of this. I'm tired of feeling this way. I just want this feeling to stop. And that's what made me suicidal. It wasn't that I was just dreaming of dying. It was just I was tired of being miserable for so long. And it was like I had to take that final leap of faith and trust in my ability to take care of myself no matter what. And that goes back to that resiliency that I got from childhood, which is it's like, you may have post-traumatic stress syndrome or a disorder or whatever it is. You might have PTSD, but it doesn't mean that you can't grow any further. There's tons of research that proves there is growth after trauma if you work on it. And that's what I am focused on now myself, is just always being able to work on that trauma. When I feel something that's making me miserable, then I have to take a really good look inside myself to decide, is it because I'm doing something that doesn't line up with one of my values now? Because my values have changed. They're not what it was when I was growing up. Family was always a huge value. Well, family was a value because it was a value for everybody else in my family. So I had to follow suit. Family is important to me and very valuable to me, but it isn't the most important value in my life now. Now it's more about connection, not necessarily family. It doesn't have to be a family connection now. Family to me isn't always blood now. And it's like, as I've grown and my awareness has become a lot broader and bigger, I understand family isn't always blood. And those that are closest to you may not always, or the people that are blood to you may not always be able to provide the healthy environment you need going forward at any given moment in time.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really, really important to note too is that we as a species, as humans, we need interaction. We need connection. We are not meant to be solitary creatures. We are meant to thrive in like-minded community.
Right. I was flipping through my notes going, oh man, where's the thing I had from last week that had the needs? That was one of the needs. One of the 6 basic human needs was the need for connection. And that goes to this. This goes to the relationship portion that we're, discussing today.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like another really, really, really important thing too is like what we were talking about last podcast. But it's, you must become familiar with your own love language. And you must become familiar with your partner's love language. And sometimes it might actually just take communication to find those things.
Right.
Like,
And
what makes you tick?
exactly. And that goes right here. If you don't have a relationship with somebody and you want a relationship with somebody, or you desire to have a better relationship with somebody, then instead of being, well, they're always this and they're always that, what can I do to make this better? What can I do to offer understanding? What can I do to make it easier for this person to come to me and talk to me? It might require a very uncomfortable conversation for you, because you maybe as a child never saw how a mother-daughter actually talks to each other, because you didn't actually talk. Or maybe it's a father-son. Maybe as father and son, there wasn't really an emotional bond there. Maybe there was some tension. Maybe there was abuse. Whatever was there that prevented you from actually being able to just go up to your dad and say, this is what's going on in my life. What do I do? How do I handle this? Because that requires an element of trust. If you don't trust that person, then you grow up not knowing how that communication is to work. So you actually have to learn how to communicate to your child so that you can properly talk to them and build a relationship bridge, that you have open communication, and they understand that if they come to you, they might hear something that they don't want to hear, but they're okay coming to you because they trust that you're not going to jump on down their throat because you told them something you were thinking and it was dangerous, or whatever the case may be. You want your kids to come to you, but you have to really think, what was your relationship with your parents? How was that communication? Is that the reason why you're struggling to communicate now? And maybe it's going to take that uncomfortable conversation with a child to say, hey, look, number one, I'm not a mind reader. Number two, our communication has to come directly. So I'm going to need you to talk to me, and I'm going to need to talk to you. And, it's probably going to be weird and uncomfortable to begin with, but it's going to get easier over time as you practice it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I did write down incompatibility
Mm-hmm.
as being, sometimes there is just no getting around it. We're incompatible. And trauma bonds.
Yes.
We trauma bond. We come together and we find kinship in like trauma, whether we recognize that that's why it's coming together or not. We do have, like, most relationships have some point of, we feel like we are the same
Mm-hmm.
because we have suffered the same fate or similar fates. Like maybe a husband and wife have gotten married, and their trauma bond is over the fact that they both came from neglectful families.
Mm-hmm.
That's their trauma bond. But then you have one partner, which is what I've gone through. You have one partner who heals and starts to recognize that there's a trauma bond there, and that I need to do you need to do what you need to do to heal. And whenever you start making those recognitions that, oh, hey, the reason that this is even a relationship in the first place is because we bonded over the trauma of it. I am now healing from the trauma that caused that bond. And
Mm-hmm.
so now there is no longer a bond left.
Mm-hmm.
But and I feel like it would be a completely different situation if that partner was to take the initiative and work on the healing steps as well. Like I said before, you have to have that. You don't have to be growing at the same rate or at the same level, but you need to have growth showing, and if you don't put in the effort, you're not going to have any growth. Like, I mean, you put a plant out in the sun, it makes the effort to reach the sun, like if
Right.
you put a plant in a windowsill, for example, the leaves of that plant will turn automatically to get the most sunlight, right? It does what it needs to do to optimize its growth naturally. So if you as a person are optimizing your growth, you really need your relationships or that are around you to be growing with you. And I think that's why I've got like 2 friendships now.
Well, yeah, you realize that maybe some of the friendships you have are because you were needing a certain type of relationship in your life. And as you go through your healing process and you start to heal those little broken bits that, maybe my little bit was that I was seeking outside validation of what I was doing. I'm doing this right now. So what do you think? Is it cool? Is it okay? Should I do that? Should I date this person? Should I not date that person? Like, I'm looking for somebody to tell me everything's okay. But I need to be able to do that for myself. Um, Become very codependent on your friends, even. Codependency just doesn't exist between husbands and wives. It can be between your friends too. They completely be codependent on you for a certain behavior to happen. And as you grow and you start to see it and realize it, and you decide you don't want to do that anymore, so you kind of stop, that other person's going to notice. And then they're going to reach out again and want the same interaction that they always get. And because it's different now, they're going to be like, hey, how come you're not like this anymore? I feel like you're pulling away from me. I feel like our relationship isn't as close as it used to be. Well, maybe that's because you might take too much. Maybe you haven't realized or not aware of how maybe the way you live your life and the things that you talk about actually reverberate off of this person. I've changed my life over now to wanting to, if I'm talking to somebody on the phone, here's my disclaimer there is people need to vent, and I'm always open for venting. Preface it with, hey, I really need to vent. Guess what? Now you've got me for the next hour and a half. If you want, vent away, because I know you just need to vent. I'm not going to stand here and offer you feedback. You want to vent. But if you want my help on something, you're going to have to ask me for that advice, because I don't want to give unsolicited advice anymore, especially if you just want to vent. If you just want to vent to get it out, by all means, vent and get it out. But I also realize that, the relationships that I carry in my life now, they ask first. They know that, hey, my boundaries have been in place for a while now, that if they need to come to me for something big, they might have to go, hey, do you have spoons for me? Or can I vent to you for a second? I don't need help. I just need to get this off of my chest. And that's just a small change I made in my circle of friends, was making sure that they knew that, I can't always be available for the stuff going on, because I might have stuff going on myself. But if you reach out and just ask, I'm probably going to be available to you. And if I'm not, I will tell you, because sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I just don't have the energy to carry somebody else's burden with me. I can't step into it with them and just be there with them. If I do that, then I have this overwhelming need to fix things. That's my trauma response. So I have to be very conscious about what I allow at any one given time, because that codependency will kick your butt. It can happen to your friends. It can happen in your relationships. And that's definitely something that you don't want. You should always have relationship parameters set. And if you don't know how to make those, I have a list for that too.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and that's codependency is like a huge, huge, huge issue. And like, I mean, I don't know a lot of men's codependency issues, being a woman, but I know that like one of the biggest themes, and it comes from women all over the world. It is a collective trauma for women, is the inability to feel like they can do it on their own.
Mhm.
That is a codependency.
You
A
need a
lot
man.
of women
You
feel
need a man in
stuck.
your life.
Yeah. A lot of women feel stuck in relationships based on the fact that they can't do it on their own. Like, that's been my biggest hurdle. I know that is doing it, learning that I can,
And
learning that I can.
it was my hurdle too. Like that was the point where, and the funny thing is I had a job and I was already collecting disability at like 70%. So, like, I could have walked away at any time and taken care of myself, but I was afraid to because of that collective trauma right there. Like, how am I going to do it all by myself? I can't do it by myself. I need a husband to help me do it. That's the way it's supposed to work. My mom never left, even after she found out terrible things had happened to me. That's what modeled that behavior. She never left, she stayed.
Mm-hmm. But that's like, it's a patriarchal mindset.
Mm-hmm.
We've taken and diminished women because in ancient times, women were priestesses. They were leaders in the spiritual community just as much as men were. And whenever, like, throughout the fall of matriarchy and the rise of the patriarchy, most notable, like, with like Rome, you
Mm-hmm.
know because even like the Greeks, worshipped women. They had,
Mm-hmm.
but and the Greeks were very, nous, the eye of the heart, knowing that the seat of the soul, and that there was more to all of this than what we see, right? We have that fall into where, men came into absolute power. And what did they do? They hunted women as witches. They burned them
Right.
at the stake. Any woman that ever showed any sort of spiritual prowess, she worships Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nothing more than, a belief in paganism.
Yeah.
And which is like, if you're not religious, but believe in a god, you're a pagan. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just the way it is. And we have gone through that throughout society. Women have slowly started becoming autonomous, if I
Yeah.
can talk. And, like, right now, the world sees it as going backwards because of the abortion stuff and everything. But we have slowly gained our rights back, the right to vote, the right to own property, all of those things. Those were all things that we used to be able to do thousands of years ago that got taken away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, that is an ingrained and very collective trauma in the female or the feminine side of the way things work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just by, it's we have to heal from it, and we are slowly doing so. But part of that is recognizing that we are powerful beings, that we are the portal from the heavenly realms to the earthly realm for
Mm-hmm.
souls. We are very beautiful, enlightened beings if we can just recognize that we've got to heal, and that we can move past any obstacle set in our way. And right now that obstacle happens to be, being able to recognize that you can do it. You can do it, even if you've been told your whole life that you can't, that you can.
Mm-hmm. Right. Um, Back to assessing relationships, and this can happen at any time. You can assess at any time. But within 3 months to a year of any new relationship, you probably should assess the relationship at some point in time. And the first thing you need, or to set the relationship parameters, sorry. So the first thing you need to do is assess where you are in the relationship. Second step is to assess what you want from the relationship. Number 3 is to prepare yourself for what they might say or how you will react to what they say. Number 4 is to be mindful of how you start the conversation. Number 5 is to ask open-ended questions. Number 6 is to use I statements. And 7 is to be specific. So saying I want to be loved by you is not specific enough as it would be to say, you know what, I need a little bit more touch intimacy from you right now because I'm feeling insecure, and what would make me feel secure in this relationship is you wanting to be close to me and us touching. That might be as simple as it. And, you need to have these parameters in your relationship so that they know what you want from them, and they know, wait, I think I messed that up. You want to know what each other wants in the relationship. Being in a relationship, you should be supporting the other person in their relationship or in their goals in life, period. And they should be supporting you in your goals. They may not necessarily be the same goals, and they don't have to be the same goals, but you should be very supportive of these goals. So if you find yourself married to somebody and you have absolutely no interest in anything they do and you're never interested in it, you don't even show interest, well, guess what? You're not going to have an intimate relationship because maybe it's all one-sided and they don't get to express anything they need to express. You're not interested in their work, but they need to vent about their work. So either you're going to allow them to vent about their work, or you're going to give them hell every time they do vent about their work. And then they're not going to feel heard or wanted in the relationship, and the relationship falls apart.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So yeah, but building parameters around your relationship are so important. Now, I never had boundaries in my life. So I want my very last intimate relationship that I had was very one-sided. I was very much over anxious about it all the time. And I was very much low avoidance. So if there was anything I could do, if there was any gift I could buy, if there was anything, I was out shopping and I saw something that reminded me of this person, I was going to buy it for them because it was going to show them how much I cared for them. But that's not what showed them how I cared for them at all. That was just how I wanted to show my love. That person couldn't see that. So they didn't understand that was actually me showering them in love. They didn't get it. They just, oh, this person buys me a bunch of crap. Okay, whatever. And it's like,
love languages.
That's why it's so, yeah, exactly. That's why it's so important to understand those love languages and also be able to express what you need in a relationship to the person you're in the relationship with, not to all of the friends around. Man, I'm in this relationship with this guy and he is not doing this, this, and this. Well, that ain't going to get you anything talking to your friends about it. You need to talk to them about it to get any results or change. Your friends could give you advice, but what keeps a relationship alive is initiating intimacy. If you are not willing to initiate any intimacy with your partner, you're not willing to start a conversation with them, you're not willing to sit with them and watch their favorite movie on the couch with them, if you're not interested in anything they're doing, then they're probably going to lose interest in everything you're doing and your relationship will fall apart. You have to make sure that your partner feels desired by you. And initiating intimacy reminds them that you are attracted to them and that you want to feel close and connected. That's what keeps a relationship alive. And if you find yourself at any point not willing or wanting to do any of that, then your relationship might already be dead in the water.
Absolutely. It all comes back to communication.
It really does.
It really does. All of it is communication because, like we there are chemicals reactions in your body that make you feel things that are not necessarily true. It's like this, you get oxytocin release, love hormone, you feel butterflies in your belly, blah, blah, blah. All of
You
these
feel so good. I'm in love.
right. But what we're not recognizing is that those things are actually forming of an attachment.
Mhm.
And we have to recognize that attachment isn't love.
Right. Oh my gosh, you're exactly right. And I want to say along with that, labeling your relationship does not necessarily mean you are in a committed relationship, nor does saying I don't do labels absolve you from having a conversation about commitment. Very, very, very important when in even that process, because that is like love is a chemical reaction. Like our bodies are designed to act a certain way when we become in close contact with a pheromone that says, hey, breeding time. Guess what? We don't have control over the chemical reaction. It's going to happen. But we have to be able to determine whether or not that was a chemical reaction or this is something that can last and be long term and it's compatible, because that chemical reaction can come along at any time and then suddenly you're with somebody and realize you are completely incompatible with this person. This person loves NASCAR and you don't even like watching TV. Let's see. How much more? Is there anything else on relationships we should
I
be
don't have anything
covering?
else.
There's a ton more on relationships that we can cover, actually. It's just
Right.
we don't want to keep everybody listening to us babble forever. Here's what I want to add. Being present, mindfulness, awareness, and I call mindfulness basically is awareness, because mindfulness includes being aware of everything in the present moment with nothing dragged from the past. When we carry trauma, typically we have little pieces of us that are broken, that need repairing within ourselves so that we can fully love ourselves and be present. Because if we don't repair those past hurts come with us wherever we go. And any relationship can trigger some of those past hurts, and we won't be able to decipher whether or not that's a past or a now. And now is never the past. Now can be a whole new situation. So being present is so important when thinking about a relationship, period. You can't have unresolved trauma following you into every relationship. That's why we work so hard to heal ourselves. So I encourage you, if you have little bits, if you feel that you have little bits in you that might be broken, things from the past that, you think while you're in your current relationship, oh crap, this might be happening again, then maybe there are some things that you need to look into yourself and heal. And by doing so, you can also strengthen the relationships that are already in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to add that, we are sent to this plane. Earth is a school. You've heard me say this before.
Yeah. Hey, that's another one of our catchphrases. Earth is a school. School's in session.
Earth is the hardest school. And we are sent here to suffer. We are sent here to suffer so that we may heal. Because without the suffering, there is no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no way of knowing how well, how good something is unless you've had the lowest point of it. There was a word that I was looking for, but it's just escaping me. I'll think of it in 5 minutes.
You got the point across, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah. We're just, without suffering, we are unaware of how good it can be.
Exactly. And in that suffering, there's always growth. There's an opportunity for growth in every bit of suffering we experience. And that's because that suffering is giving us an opportunity to learn something new about the world around us. And if we don't learn anything, it's going to come back around, and it might come back around a little more intense next time because it's something that we're trying to be taught. And that's how the universe works, is to teach us the lessons that we need to get us through to the next part, to the next part, to the next thing. You know, we only have what is it? 2 dates and a dash. That's what our lives are. 2 dates and a dash. We get a beginning date, a dash, and an end date when we die. We're trying to make the most of that dash right now.
Right, absolutely. And spiritually speaking, like this is just a moment. Each lifetime is just a moment in the scope of your entire soul's existence.
Yep. So let's say, I think that pretty much covers relationships, don't you? Or at least this portion of relationships.
Yeah, it can
Because
go
it'll come up
so
again.
much deeper.
Everything came up from the past podcast and this podcast.
Yeah, and they did. And that's, I mean, par for the course, I think.
So first, let's give a quick plug to our event that is coming up, the Harvest Moon event, September 9th through 11th in Palm Beach, Florida. There are 4 slots. If you are interested in coming with us, do let us know. We have had some people reach out and already express interest, so do capture your slot. Remember, it is $250 a person, and you can find the details on our website. Also, I guess we'll go right into that. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on our website at twitchisle.com. And you can find us on YouTube. And we, of course, load to Buzzsprout, so you can find us where podcasts are listened to.
Absolutely.
And
oh,
go ahead.
And of course, as always, take what resonates with you and leave the rest, because we understand that everyone's perception is probably a little bit different.
Exactly. Perception. That was a big show. All right. Well, we wish everybody nothing but light and love. And we look forward to seeing you next time on To Which Isle.
Light and love, everyone. Goodbye.